With the 15th pick and with the 26th pick in the 2019 NFL Draft, the Washington Redskins select Dwayne Haskins, Montez Sweat.
Welcome, all my fellow Redskin brethren and sistren. I am your man and resident Redskins fan, Lou. Thank you for joining me here on the Redskins Report. Coming at you with the 5 biggest takeaways from the Redskins' 30-10 loss last night in preseason game number 1 at Cleveland versus the Browns. So before I get to that, we were live last night during the telecast. I was live for the first and second half, and I made a major announcement regarding Redskins content in the upcoming fall. And I want to go ahead and rehash that for those of you who weren't live with us, and shame on you if you were not. But nonetheless, what I essentially told the viewing audience last night is that there will be no more Redskins Report on Tuesdays. I used to break down the game from Sunday and kind of comb over that with a fine-tooth comb, and then we would move on to the upcoming week's game, and I would give my prediction, and we would do it all in one night and knock it out. That is no more. In its place will be a brand new series, and you can see it kind of scrolling across the screen. Redskins Nightly News will take its place. That's a nightly show Monday through Thursday in which we will talk Redskins every single night here on the Louie Network. I think the program, I have it slated for 6:30 every night. It's on the website. For those of you who have perused the website, then this is not news to you. But if you haven't, every night, Monday through Thursday, we will break down the Redskins. Mondays, we will take a look at the action that took place on Sunday and kind of really go through that and all the fallout from the game, win, loss, tie, draw, whatever. We're going to talk about it. Also probably talk about Jay Gruden's presser the next day because that would have already taken place as well. Tuesday, we'll talk about injuries, anything that has happened since the game and any new news that has come out and kind of, gloss over everything and put a bow on Sunday's game. Wednesday, we'll start to move on and look forward to the next week's contest, start looking at the opponent, start talking about strengths and weaknesses and what the Redskins have to do to try to come out victorious. And then Thursday, we'll wrap up the week and talk about predictions for the game and all the things that we need to discuss to put a bow on the week's action. So Redskins Nightly News coming at you starting whatever day is after Labor Day. All right, I don't want to sit here and make up a date, but Monday, that first Monday in September is Labor Day. That Tuesday is when the program will start, and then we'll go Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday that week, and then we'll come back the next week and we'll do it all over again. R3 still going to be in full effect after every game. Expect to see your man Louie T in your face for about a good 10 minutes talking about the Redskins contest and what happened and try to give you all the content I can in a short period of time as to how the game went. So new program for the Redskins fans out there on the Louie T Network, Redskins Nightly News coming your way this fall. Be on the lookout for that. That being said, I want to talk about the 5 biggest takeaways from last night's game. And let me first say this. I talked about this before. I feel like I need to reiterate this because I saw a lot of overreaction last night to Daniel Jones having a 5-for-5 night for 67 yards and a touchdown. For some of the other guys, Kyler Murray looked sharp for the Cardinals, and Dwayne Haskins threw 2 picks, and people were all up in arms. And look, guys, it's a process, and we're gonna talk about that in a second. But even more so, the offensive line did not look good, and we didn't play well necessarily. It's the preseason, okay? Take it with a grain of salt, especially preseason games number 1 and 4. Especially, first of all, it's preseason in general, so all 4 preseason games are straight ass cheeks. But then when you want to even dive in a little deeper and say, if you want to take it a step further, preseason game number 1 and number 4 are absolutely the worst measuring sticks, okay? Nobody played for the Redskins last night. Literally, nobody played. I might have counted all of 2 starters that played, and those were our 2 inside linebackers. That is it on the defensive side. And on the offensive side, the left side of our offensive line, that'll probably be our projected starters, They didn't come into the game until the third quarter last night. So it's what I'm trying to tell you is relax. 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 It's okay. You know, like it's the preseason. And they take score for a reason. I want to win just like you want to win, right? But it's the preseason. All right? It's the preseason. Keep that in mind. It's the preseason. I shouldn't have to say it that many times, but I got to say it. I actually had someone in the comment section leave a comment saying, hey, Jay Gruden's play calling is still the worst and he hasn't learned anything. Are you serious right now? Like, we talking about the preseason, not a regular season game. Don't make me go AI on you. We're not talking practice, not a game, but practice. That's essentially what we're talking about. Not a regular season game. No, not a regular season game, but preseason. It's preseason, right? Everything's vanilla. Nobody played. It doesn't matter. It's preseason. Now, you know, I told you, I'm more likely to get worked up about preseason game number 3. That's supposed to be the dress rehearsal. That's when you're going to see the starters for an extended period of time. 2 years ago, if you all remember, if you were watching me, we were live during the Cincinnati game at home, and we stunk it up with Kirk and the first team offense. I was not pleased. We looked bad. That's when I get alarmed. When you don't look good in preseason game number 3, or at least look salvageable. We didn't look like a team ready to go and win a game in week 1, and we didn't win in week 1 that year. So that's when I start to become alarmed, in week 3 of the preseason. But even then, I taper my expectations and I take it with a grain of salt because at the end of the day, it's still the preseason. That being said, let's get into the 5 biggest takeaways. And again, take every single one of these, because it's still the preseason, with a grain of salt. However, I feel pretty confident giving you these 5 biggest takeaways, all right, and telling you that you can take these to the bank. Similar to what I told you about the draft when I gave you the 5 biggest takeaways from the draft and what the Redskins were going to do. I think I hit on 4 out of 5 of those. All right, I'm going to hit on 5 out of 5 of these. So let's jump into the biggest takeaways from the Redskins' week 1 preseason loss at Cleveland, 30-10. And we start with number 5. Don't count Robert Davis out of this wide receiver race. I think one of the most eye-opening things was the order in which the receivers played last night. Robert Davis and I told you that Robert Davis and Brian Quick were guys that were right there on the cusp of making this roster, but there were just too many talented guys in front of them. I might have misspoke. I think that looking at when Kelvin Harmon, and again, this is why I say take it with a grain of salt. It's the first preseason game. Kelvin Harmon could ascend on the depth chart as we get closer and closer to the regular season and make this roster. But as of right now, Kelvin Harmon got mop-up duty in the 4th quarter. He got 2 meaningless catches in literally the final minute of the game, and he was not heard from for the first 3.5 quarters. The fact that this man got in with guys that aren't going to be playing in the league with that 4th string group tells me a lot. That was actually pretty scary for a guy that I thought could be a steal in the draft in his rookie season. He doesn't look like he's going to make the roster. And it's funny, somebody that was on the live stream with us, 7PRS, said, hey, man, you know, Kelvin Harmon is a guy we may be able to sneak onto the practice squad. And I had never looked at it from that lens. My whole thought process the entire time is both of these rookie receivers that we drafted are going to make the football team. Robert Davis is a guy that's been on this roster now 3 years. Injuries have set him back the last 2, but he knows the Jay Gruden system. If nothing else, he's light years ahead of where a rookie like Kelvin Harmon is. And I can tell you this much. Kelvin Harmon will drop the football. He has dropped it throughout camp. I talked about that during his breakdown, that's something he's got to concentrate on, catching the football. He may be a little bit behind not a little bit, a lot behind Robert Davis, and he should be because Davis is a veteran. If you consider veterans, guys that have been in the league 3 years or more, Robert Davis knows this system, and he's way ahead of Kelvin Harmon right now, and we saw him play extensively last night. Again, first preseason game, take it with a grain of salt, but if that's anything that we need to be taking into consideration, I think Robert Davis has squarely put himself in position to try to crack this 53-man roster. I told you I think the Redskins are going to keep 6 wide receivers. I think he might be the sixth guy. And not to mention, we all penciled in Cam Sims as a guy. Cam Sims was right back there getting mop-up duty in late stages of the second into the third quarter. We didn't see him for a long time either. So I'm just saying maybe Robert Davis is a little bit higher on the totem pole than I and some of you out there gave him credit for. Maybe this guy isn't the seventh receiver on the outside looking in. Maybe he's more like receiver number 5 on the roster right now because he's also a core special teamer. So I think Robert Davis is a guy you cannot dismiss in this wide receiver race. And he scored the only touchdown for the Redskins last night. And he looked really good in his limited action. So I'm just saying do not count Robert Davis out in this wide receiver race. Takeaway number 4. Wes Martin will be our starting left guard. Now, I know a lot of you are saying, duh, after watching Eric Flowers, he didn't have a choice but to be our starting left guard. And while that may be true, this is more about the way Wes Martin looked and less about Eric Flowers and how bad he looked. Wes Martin looked great. Now, again, take it with a grain of salt. It was third stringers, guys that most likely won't be on an NFL roster, or if they are, they're the 53rd or 52nd or 51st guy on a roster, or they're on someone's practice squad. However, that's what you're supposed to do to those types of players. You dominate them, and I thought he was dominant, especially in the run game in the third quarter when he was in along with Donald Penn. So Wes Martin is going to be our starting left guard. And really, again, I talked about this during the telecast last night, but Jay Gruden and his offensive line staff, they felt like the best thing to do was leave Wes Martin and Donald Penn, a seasoned NFL veteran, on the second team. Why? Together? Because they're going to get reps together because they're going to be your starting unit. We all know Donald Penn is going to start. Wes Martin is next to him. Why? Because he's going to start too. And so they got reps together in the third quarter with one another, and both of them looked sharp, especially Wes Martin at left guard. And after seeing what we saw in the first quarter with Jerron Christian and Eric Flowers, it's pretty safe to say those two will be your starting combination on the left side. And Wes Martin, I think, not necessarily has locked it up, but he's, for all intents and purposes, locked it up at left guard. You go to takeaway number 3. Cole Holcomb and Jimmy Moreland can contribute right away. I see those guys, and I left Jimmy's name out somehow. He didn't make the cut. But Cole Holcomb and Jimmy Moreland can contribute right away is a massive takeaway from last night's game. Now, I'm not going, crazy. Like some of you guys where I heard someone comparing Jimmy Moreland to Darrell Green last night. I'm like, whoa. Pump your brakes. Slow your roll. What are you doing right now? Like, are you serious? Like, are you really comparing Jimmy Moreland to a Hall of Fame, one of the 5 greatest, maybe 7 greatest Redskins of all time? Are you doing that right now after one preseason game? Come on, man, stop. So it got crazy last night with the Jimmy hysteria, but for good reason. Jimmy was outstanding last night. But let's relax. Hey, let's breathe a little bit. As I mentioned at the top, RELAX. Relax, all right? Breathe a little bit. Jimmy was outstanding. Cole Holcomb was impressive as well. And what that says to me is because, again, I thought that Cole Holcomb was a little ways away from being a contributor. I thought he'd contribute on special teams. I didn't know if he could really help on the defensive side of the football. Well, last night showed me, and camp has reinforced this, but last night was a clear indication that, yes, he can, in fact, help this football team on defense at inside linebacker in his rookie season. He can do that. And same can be said for Jimmy Moreland. I didn't really know what to expect from him. I really wanted to see him make the adjustment from, smaller school prospect that dominated to a guy that's now on a much bigger stage in the NFL. And, Jimmy was outstanding last night, and Jimmy was in from the jump. Now, that first possession, anybody that was in, they were a part of the most disastrous possession of the night defensively. But Jimmy quickly bounced back and really played well throughout the night. Even when he got beat, he made plays. So Cole Holcomb and Jimmy Moreland, to me, showed that they can contribute on this team right away, even if not in a necessarily starting capacity. It's great to know that those guys provide us with some quality depth And before it's long, those guys are going to be starting. And they're the future. You know, the Redskins are becoming a very young team, which is exciting. You look at the defensive line, it's young. You look at these linebackers with Sean Deion Hamilton and now potentially Cole Holcomb, they're young. And then you get to that secondary, Landon Collins, still a relatively young guy. Monte Nicholson, a very young guy. And, you know, Fabian Moreau and Jimmy Moreland and some of these young guys. So, and hell, even Dunny, young guys. So this team is starting to become very young. Haskins, young guy. You know, Terry McLaurin, young guy. Robert Davis, young guy. You know, Cam Sims, all these guys that we think, Trey Quinn, young guys. You know, it's exciting. So that was exciting to see those dudes play at the level they did last night. And it shows that they can contribute. In what capacity, we don't know yet. But at least we know they're capable, fully capable of contributing in 2019. Number 2, the biggest takeaway, Dwayne Haskins' development will be a process. I think some of you guys wanted to see him right away, throw him out there. And I kept saying, look, only put him out there if he's ready. And I told you, a guy that only made 12 starts in his collegiate career, you know, 13 starts, whatever it was, one season of starts, not going to be ready to just jump in to the NFL. Now, I know some of you are saying Kyler Murray's going to do it for the Arizona Cardinals. Well, guess what? Kyler Murray is stepping into an offense that is tailor-made for him. It's like he's still in college, all right? It's almost the same vernacular, same terminology. Everything is pretty much the same for Kyler Murray in Arizona because the coach that is coaching him essentially is bringing his college offense to the NFL, and it suits Kyler Murray like hand in glove. Whereas Jay Gruden is fitting some things. We saw a ton of shotgun for Dwayne Haskins last night, which means Jay is fitting his offense. And again, it's not like Jay was going out and calling plays and scripting up stuff, but he called base stuff. You know, some of his base routes and base concepts, he called those for Dwayne Haskins out of the gun. Now, the only time we really saw Dwayne Haskins under center was for a handoff or for boot, for play action. So any other time when we knew it was going to be a throw, he was in gun, which is what Haskins is comfortable doing. So you see Jay making some adjustments, but at the same time, it's still a process for Haskins. You're still seeing him reading the plays off his armband. You still see him, you know, there was a false start last night on a misread on the snap. These are the growing pains that you have with a young rookie. And then, of course, the interceptions. You know, the first one was just a throw where he tried to be too fine. I didn't have a problem with the throw nor the read. I just had a problem with the accuracy of the throw. Let it go. You know, the footwork was horrible on that throw. But the second one was the one that you say, okay, Dwayne, you can't do that. You cannot force the football into essentially what amounted to triple coverage and expect good results, especially when you're throwing it to, you know, J.P. Holtz or I forgot the other tight end's name, Flanagan. It was one of those two. They're not making a play for you in that kind of situation. There was no window there for him to fit that football in, and then he airmailed it to make it even worse. And so those are the kinds of mistakes that you need to go back to the film and say, hey, you can't do this. You know, you don't like what you see, do what you did for the vast majority of the night, tuck it and run, or chuck it out of bounds, you know, or extend the play and see if someone comes open, but don't do that. So it's a process. And what you should have gathered from last night is that he's not ready to start week 1, but it's going to, and he made some good throws. He made some outstanding throws throughout the night. So there's some reason to be optimistic and there's some reason to be a little pessimistic. Bottom line is it was a mixed bag from Dwayne Haskins last night, and I'm looking forward to seeing more of him throughout the preseason. And I'm excited about the future with Dwayne Haskins. And he, like I said, he made some outstanding throws, but he made some boo-boos too. And that's all a part of the process of having a young quarterback. These things are going to take place. And I'm glad that he doesn't have to start right away. You know, and I've been adamant about that. If he's not ready, don't throw him out there to the wolves and get him ate up. And now, you know, with Colt and Case, and there was a little bit of discussion as to whether, you know, maybe a Colt or a Case gets released if Dwayne was, you know, light years ahead of one of the other guys. I seriously doubt that he's ahead of either one of those guys. And we know we saw the depth chart come out and Dwayne was third. The depth chart, to me, is something that you can just kind of disregard. But there is some validity to that. You know, that Colt's number 1 right now. I still think that Case Keenum has a legitimate shot at starting, but Colt is number one right now, and Colt's probably the favorite to start. I'm not discounting Case Keenum. I don't think Dwayne has a chance at starting week 1. But Dwayne, if we're not good, he will play in 2019. Know that. And so it's a process. Just know that. And I think last night really hammered that point home for anyone out there thinking that Dwayne needed to start week 1. I think that last night should have recalibrated your expectations for Dwayne Haskins. And again, you don't want to overreact, but it was the first preseason game. There weren't a ton of starters out there, and there were some throws that you just can't make. And they were against backups. So I shudder to think what it would look like against, seasoned veterans that know in this league. So it's a process. And biggest takeaway from last night is the offensive line depth is sparse. And that's putting it very mildly. I'm being nice. Our offensive line depth is trash, is what it is. That was a wow. It's almost hard to put into words. That was so disheartening last night, what we put on the field. I think you could argue that 4 out of the 5 guys on that first team offensive line don't belong in the NFL, or 3 of them. I think Tony Bergstrom might have been with that first group, and Tony's okay. But I think Jerron Christian and Tony Bergstrom are the only 2 guys on that first unit that we had out there that could make this roster. Outside of those 2 guys, it was bad. It was abysmal. I mean, Zach Karen, I was disappointed in him last night. He gave up that massive hit on Haskins, that sack where I thought he might have had a concussion when he got slammed down by the end zone. He was awful last night. Timon Paris, my God, he was a turnstile last night. He was horrible at right tackle. I mean, it was bad last night. Right now, the only depth I see on this team along the offensive line are Ross Pierce Baker, Jerron Christian, and he still needs work, but he's young. He's a second-year guy, and he didn't really play last year, so he still amounts to a rookie when it's all said and done in terms of playing experience. And the only other guy is Tony Bergstrom. That's not good enough. I mean, simply put, that's not good enough because our offensive line is going to go as follows, starting from left to right. It's going to be Donald Penn, Wes Martin, Chase Rouillet, Brandon Sheriff, and Morgan Moses. And after that, you're really grasping at straws in terms of depth. I mean, if any one of those guys goes down for any amount of time, with the guys that we have on the roster right now, it is a nightmare thinking about how we could potentially look along the offensive line. You want to put Dwayne Haskins behind that? And as someone said last night, and I think they said it very eloquently, that AD last year was having to make guys miss consistently at the line of scrimmage in the run game. That's probably going to be the same thing this year. I mean, when you look at this, because you've got to assume, and I knock on wood, we're going to knock on some wood here, but you've got to assume that because the NFL is a war of attrition, we're going to have injuries along the offensive line. It's just the nature of the beast. Some teams get lucky and all 5 of their starters play all 16 games and they don't have any fluctuations along their offensive line. Generally, we're not that lucky to have our offensive line stay intact for a full 16-game slate. And so you've got to assume that we're going to be mixing and matching parts. And I shudder to think, and I hate to say this, but I think his ass is going to make the football team. I don't think Eric Flowers is going anywhere. I think they look at him as a big-ass reclamation project, and they think they can fix him. I don't think there's any fixing Eric Flowers. I think that flower is dead. But they think they can bring it back to life. They can go right ahead and keep trying. They've got 3 more preseason games to see if they can figure it out. Bottom line is, our offensive line depth is scary. It's sparse. If you ask me where the least amount of depth resides on this roster, it's offensive line. All right? It's pretty porous. And everyone keeps lauding and praising our offensive line coach, Bill Callahan. Look, man, I think he's good. I don't think he's great. I've never once said, man, Bill Callahan is doing a bang-up job with this offensive line. When backups come in the game for us, they look like damn backups. Unlike New England with Dante Scarnecchia, when backups come in the game, they play like starters. All right. How often do you see Tom Brady getting his goddamn brains bashed in New England? And they run the goddamn football and they stay mixing and matching line parts. We get offensive linemen in the game that aren't supposed to be there. They look like offensive linemen that aren't supposed to be there. So to me, Bill Callahan is an above average to average offensive line coach. Stop giving him all this praise and credit. Everybody wants to give him all this credit and accolades from what he did with Dallas. Dallas got an elite line. That's why. He ain't did shit for us since he got here. So you can chill with that. I can think of 5 offensive line coaches around the league who are much better than Bill Callahan. So if you want to earn your keep, if you want people to really give you credit, take some of these bum-ass dudes we got as backups and turn them into some damn quality starters in this league. Do that. Because that shit we saw last night, trash. So those are my 5 biggest takeaways from the first preseason game, man. It was not pretty, but it's the preseason. And honestly speaking, I wasn't bent out of shape about last night. A lot of last night, to me, I swept it under the rug and I said, all right, on to the next. You know, we'll see more of the starters next week. We'll get a better feel for the true depth of this roster. We'll get to see a lot of the young guys that we didn't see, like Darius Geis, like a Terry McLaurin. A lot of those guys will play next week. Looking forward to seeing them on the field, and we'll start to get a real sense for what this team is going to look like in the upcoming season in next week's preseason game at home, the home opener in the preseason versus the Cincinnati Bengals. So I am a Redskins fan, etched in burgundy and gold. My Redskins spirit will never die. Redskins spirit will never fold until we meet again. Hail to our beloved Redskins. I'll be live for every single preseason game, first and second half. We'll chop it up, watch the game together. I'll open up the phone lines like I did last night, even though you guys were too coward to call. Nobody called in last night, which is a damn shame. I thought I would at least get one brave fan to call in and talk about what he had seen tonight, or last night rather, but that's nor here nor there. If you're not comfortable calling in, that's fine. We had a great discussion in the YouTube chat, and it was a fun night, except for the outcome of the game, but that's nor here nor there. I'm your man, Louie T, signing off. Until next time, you guys have a good one.